Hello, and it's me. I'm back again. Now, I just want to give, if I can, in a few minutes, let me see how quick I can be with this. Probably not, because as soon as I start talking, like I'm off and away. But I commented on somebody's LinkedIn post a few days ago. They probably wished I never bloody commented, because I brought like literally hundreds of people supporting, like, emoji, clap, all of that good stuff. And it was for what was it for? Like an equity and diversity, and it like a rebadged of a DEI lead. Do you know what I mean? Like, I can't even remember what they called it, but there was some name. And I gave some very specific points about what I felt the job description should be amended to say, right? And the point that I was making, let me just clarify the point, is forever and a day, right, diversity and inclusion roles, lead roles, chief diversity and inclusion officers, or whatever version, EDI, DEI, DI, DIB, diversity and inclusion belonging, whatever acronym we want to use, these roles are now in high demand, which on one hand you could argue is a very positive move. On the other hand, my word of caution is that these roles, these individuals are being hired as a catch-all to fix all of these organisations' discriminatory practices, whether it relates to race and racism, whether it relates to how other groups of employees are marginalised, and so on and so forth. So if I do come across a job role that I feel like has missed the mark, then I feel obliged to go and comment, and this is what I did. If you are recruiting for any version of diversity and inclusion, I'm just going to use that because I can't give you all the different versions, but any version of that role, here are a couple of things that I want you to hold in your mind. So point one, this agenda, if you're going to call it that, has to be owned by the board. It is not the responsibility of your HR lead. It is not the responsibility of said D&I lead to not only be responsible, accountable, and execute everything in relation to diversity and inclusion. That's point one. Point two, this role needs to be a board level role if you are to take it seriously and you are a company of a certain size. I'm just going to put that caveat because I know not everybody can afford a board level role, but if you are taking it seriously, you have to approach it with a strategic viewpoint, not just from an execution viewpoint. That person needs to be on the board. And thirdly, that person also needs to report into the CEO. Like, I can't tell you, I've seen examples of D&I leads going into like the talent partner or the head of resourcing, the head of learning and development, even HR, and I still don't believe the role should report into HR. It should report into the board, and it should be a board level role, because you need to be able to give them a certain amount of autonomy, but also support. Because if they are to do all the things that you said that you wanted to do in your 3-4 page job description, then they need resources, they need budget, they need time, and they need to know that when the shit hits the fan, they've got somebody they can go to who has the power and the influence, and dare I say privilege to a certain point, to be able to execute whatever needs to be changed. If they've got to go through lots of different routes to get to the right person, that is not going to help them. What was the other thing I put now? I'm trying to remember what else I put. So I said that, yeah. Oh, and the thing is, in this particular job description, and I know not every job description has that, but they talked about this diversity and inclusion lead being responsible for ensuring that inclusion is bedded into the culture of the organisation. And I go back to, it is not one person's responsibility, because you're making that person the single point of failure. And if you do any sort of research, particularly in the US actually, because they were always a little bit more advanced with having chief diversity and inclusion officers and the equivalents than we were in the UK. But when you look at the tenure of some of these individuals in the role, they're spinning through, and it's because it's too much pressure, and they're not given the resource, they're not given the support. So we have to stop thinking that these individuals are going to magically solve everything without ensuring that we're putting in the right foundations. And my last point is, Please, 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 can we stop using diversity and inclusion as a euphemism for anti-racism, as a euphemism for racial equity? Because like I can't tell you the number of conversations that I'm part of, publicly, meaning, I'm on panels and I'm doing all of this sort of stuff, being interviewed for all sorts, but also privately, where there is still this discomfort in calling it what it is. Now, you have to be able to deal with the issues of racism and how it shows up in your culture. You have to look at how you potentially racially discriminate against individuals, or when there are cases of racial discrimination and racism against your colleagues. You have to look at how you're going to level the playing field, not to help your black colleagues, but to make things fairer. That is what equity is. So I do get annoyed when I keep hearing like, oh, we need to just focus on what brings people together and like not what separates them. And I'm like, racism and dealing with it isn't what separates people, isn't divisive. Racism is divisive in the fact that some people are still claiming that overtly to address it, to talk about it, to put action in place to dismantle it is somehow divisive. And instead, the way to soften it is to talk more about inclusion and belonging without referencing the very things that stop black people from feeling like they belong in an organisation, is therefore part of the problem. And actually, it's whitewashing for comfort. So I hope this is taken with the vein of I'm here to help, as you know I always try and do, but I will always keep challenging on this, because I can just see we're just slipping back into, or some of us have like slid way back into, let's talk about this in a very generic and soft and fuzzy way. Well, racism is traumatic. The experiences of some of your colleagues is nothing to be proud of. It is uncomfortable to talk about it. It is uncomfortable to hold a mirror up and say, do you know what? For all of our talk, we could have done better. So now we need to step up. But you cannot be part of the solution if you're still whitewashing the problem. That's I don't even know how long this video was, but that's my little micro video. It's my little micro talk for the day. Thank you as always for listening. I'll see you again soon.